Hello, Chelan County. Happy Wednesday. I am your host of the Power Hour, Lacey Stockton, and today we are chatting with Megan Kramer all about new construction and also how you can improve the home that you already own at the same time. Megan is a efficient home rater. She does HERS rating, she does Energy Star. She's also the energy program coordinator for WSU, if you're a Coug fan. And she is just a wealth of knowledge about all things making your home energy efficient and more comfortable while spending less money. Okay, let's dive in.
Hello.
Hey, Megan, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming. I'm really excited about this one. I have a secret affinity towards natural building, so I'm hoping that we can chat about that. But I'm also excited to learn a lot about what's going on in the county in terms of new homes and how to make them more efficient.
Sounds good.
All right. Can we just dive right in? I mean, so if folks are listening right now, the cool thing about this is that we can see your comments, and Megan is here to answer any questions you have specific to your house or a little bit more general. And we also have some questions that came in before the show, including this one from Randy, which says, what's a net zero home?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when people see net zero, they think that the house just doesn't use any energy. And the reality is, what we're trying to assess is through the year. So, annually, how much energy does the house use? So, there's always going to be energy usage. It might be higher sometimes of the year, lower in other times of the year. So, the goal is to offset that. Generally, with solar is the most prevalent offshore. There's wind, there's it could be a site solar or off-site solar. There's actually, like a lot of the answers to questions I'll make today, probably it depends a lot on your particular situation and your particular definition. And do you have room at your house for solar, or does it need to be tied into maybe a more like municipal scale solar project or a community solar project where the solar is divided amongst the residents? There's some community housing trusts that are doing that model, which is kind of a cool concept. So, but that's really net zero. It's through the annually using more
Aha.
energy.
And do you know any sort of actual, not actual, but more like time of use net zero homes where they're just so tight or they're so intentional about when they use energy that are on grid? Because obviously, if you're off grid, you're going to be kind of contained in your
Yep.
energy use a lot more and more
Hmm.
intentional about when you're running your
Hmm.
your clothes washer if you have one or things like that. But are
Yeah,
there?
I mean, there's no way to say you're net zero annually if you don't have an efficient home. I mean, it would be extremely challenging to have a big enough solar system to offset the energy use for the consumptions throughout the entire year. So you're still talking about a super efficient home. And then basically offsetting the little that you do use. And that's actually what a great rule of thumb in terms of sizing solar in general is. Let's get the efficiency needs, the house as efficient as possible, so the energy needs are as low as possible, so then you can put the smallest solar system needed to actually fulfill the needs of that particular home. So if you
Yes.
don't need a lot of energy, you don't need to make a lot of energy.
And it's far more cost effective. It's
Exactly.
cheaper to make your home work better. It's also helps with comfort, than to slap some solar on there, especially when we're paying, 3 cents a kilowatt hour in Chelan County. It's not actually a cost effective way to generate power
Right.
using solar. You
Right.
are welcome to, because there's tons of great reasons to do solar,
Absolutely.
but you have to eat your conservation carrots before you get your solar sweets
Yes,
around here.
exactly. Yep. Solar is definitely not the only solution.
For sure. All right. So, when we're talking about these efficient new homes, how much more does it cost to make it what you would consider efficient home versus just a regular home that someone would
Right.
build?
Yeah, that is the question. And people really are constantly trying to find the answer. I think there's a bit of a misnomer that a quote unquote green home is more expensive. And one of the biggest pieces of the picture is not just looking at first costs, but what's the life cycle cost of this home? And when you start looking at life cycle and you start looking at a home that's going to exist in our world for 30 to 50 years, is a pretty good estimate. What are the monthly bills every single month that are being paid? And what is the environmental impact of the material use? And what are the health concerns that could potentially be attributed to materials and off gassing, VOCs, formaldehyde, those types of things? So
Or you're not allowed to, or bringing in asbestos, like that would
Right. Yeah, there's all these extrinsic things happening where you're looking at, I think a lot of people, they look at, it's going to cost this much for this material or this much for that material. And that's absolutely important. People have budgets. We need to work within budgets. But I do think there's a lot of ways to get really creative.
Mhm.
And, that's something with even the new code, they're trying to make it so people can kind of pick and choose options and find the best package to save energy, but also, choose what makes sense for that particular project. It's a climactic choice. It's where is it? Is there a view? Do you want a bunch of windows? Then you need to make trade-offs. What type of heating system are we looking at? So I do think there's some first costs that need to be considered, but I just think that's one piece of the bigger picture.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one, right? We often think about like, what are the problems right now? Future Lacey will have to deal with future costs.
Yes.
So maybe just slapping something in is good
Mm.
enough. Well,
Durability is another big one. It might be cheap today, but if it's not going to last, it's only going to last for 5 years, and you're replacing that system or
mhm,
that material, then all of a sudden it's not as cost effective as it might seem.
for sure. Yeah. So in theory, you could build a efficient home with just a little bit more design up front and thought
Yes.
for the same price
Yep.
as, what would just be a regular standard to code spec home.
Yeah, I think you absolutely could. And the design is a huge part of it as well. There's actually a lot of research being done and active involvement with design professionals now trying to say, hey, that little bump out, is it really necessary? Is that additional
Mhm.
framing, siding, drywall, insulation when you could just make the wall straight right there? Really looking at all these design decisions, they have a huge impact. And especially as materials get more expensive, it's going to be more and more necessary to really think about the design and the
Yeah,
efficiency of the design and how we can use smaller spaces just as efficiently and effectively.
for sure.
Maybe we don't need quite as big of a home to achieve what we need and want for our families.
Yeah. All right. Well, Megan, we have a question. This
Great.
one is semi-related. This one I might take. This one's related
Great.
to adding solar here in Chelan County. So John's asking, how long is the PUD process to get approved for solar net zero and the SNAP program? Our SNAP program
Yep.
is a solar and renewable energy program that the Chilean PUD has offered since, I believe, 2001 is when that started. And we're in the process of revamping it because it's 2022 and the
Yes.
county needs something different. So, John, this is a great question. As we're transitioning our program and as we get more and more requests for solar, we are adjusting our process. And the very best person to ask about this is Jim White. He's our senior energy conservation engineer. Jim is going to be the one who's going to help with your SNAP application, getting you net metered on your new solar, and making sure that it matches the diagrams that we need to be able to connect it to the grid. So, John, if you want to get in touch with Jim, he can help you through your application process. And thanks for the question. And if you're just joining us, we are chatting with Megan Kramer. She is a energy efficient homes rater and also the energy program coordinator for WSU down in Olympia. Can you just tell me, just super high level, what that program is about?
Great. Yeah. So The energy program is actually bigger than I even realized because when I was working as a home energy rater with my own business, I only sort of touched this little piece of it. And that piece is home energy ratings and working with folks to actually, provide ratings on homes and help folks be more energy efficient. There's also a whole segment of it that is very in-depthly involved with the codes, the updating the energy code. They're part of the technical advisory group for the code, and they answer technical questions, provide resources and trainings. That's another big part of it. There's also a green transportation program. There is a solar program. They're actively doing research, biofuels. There's lots of incredibly intelligent people trying to find solutions to some real world problems that it's exciting to be a part of. So there's a lot going on with the energy program.
Okay, cool. And so are you training like the next round of you? Is that part of it?
Yes, that is part of it. That is
Like
part
little
of it.
Megans coming up?
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, I think there's a huge need. There's a few things happening in the industry right now that we need more raters. We need more raters. We need folks that want to get their hands dirty, get into homes, existing homes, making them more energy efficient. Also, working with builders, building new homes to help them learn how to do it in a way that's going to meet the new code requirements, as well as, yeah, just health, durability, comfort, safety, all those things. And there's a few other pieces of legislation that are in the works. There's a tax credit, and there's Energy Star. There's all these programs, and there's a lot out there. We can get into as much detail as folks have questions about specifics, but the idea is that the basis is that home energy rater. You get a rater, you do an energy model, and from there, depending on the project, there's all kinds of things that particular project could get involved with, and there could be some money attached, like the PUD's Home High Performance Homes Incentive Program.
This is true. You speak of our high performance home incentive, which is $2,000 for folks that have a home that performs better than code in terms of their energy efficiency. And they would get in touch with a rater like you who would come and help them actually figure out how to make that happen in the most effective way possible for their specific design. And if you have questions, you can give us a call. Josh Mitchell is our residential energy advisor who created the program and answers any questions there for that. So, Megan, what matters most for energy usage in a new home? If you had to
Yes.
prioritize like one or two things, what should people focus on?
Heating and water heating and air conditioning. So, space conditioning, water heating. Those are the two big ones. And really, we live in a region where heat pumps are already very prevalent. People are familiar with them, they've used them, they understand them. The heating contractors are familiar with installing them. So basically, we we really have access to this really incredible technology, and heat pumps are getting more efficient, and the amount of energy we spend to heat and cool our homes is really has the biggest impact on our utility costs as well as environmental impacts. And then second is water heating. That's why this heat pump water heater, there's incentives there. It's in the new energy code. There's a lot of resources available for heat pump water heaters as well. So again, in a predominantly electric region, there is some gas, but in a predominantly kind of electric region here in this county, those two resources, heat pumps for space heating and air conditioning, as well as water heating, are really worth spending some time looking into and incorporating into your home. And then the other part of the heating system is also the distribution. If you're using a system that has ductwork, which you may or may not, depending on your heat pump type of system, ductwork needs to be tight and sealed and insulated, and ideally not in crawl spaces and attics, because if there are leaks, that conditioned air just leaves the home and is in the environment. So those are some really big things in the industry that we're working to educate folks on, and just get the word out that if you're paying to condition this air, let's keep it inside the envelope of your home.
Right. Let's put it where you want it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually, you mentioned the idea of having central heating versus
Hmm.
not. And I have lived in lots of different homes, some that had, like the little place where you'd put your horses. This was in Quebec. So super cold winters, pretty much zero insulation. places for horses, uh, that had the big old boiler system
Yep.
with the big radiant heaters. And I've lived in all these different kinds. I have to say, I love zonal heat.
Hmm.
If I could switch my central heating system
Hmm.
easily and cost effectively to one that I could control a lot more,
Hmm.
maybe it says something
Hmm.
about my control personality, but
Hmm.
zonal heat where you can actually decide which room is what temperature throughout the day is
Hmm.
brilliant, especially if you have homes, where not everybody lives in every single room all day long.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Second
Okay.
floor, is uncomfortable. Bonus rooms are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Additions are uncomfortable. So
Basements are
basements
uncomfortable.
are uncomfortable. There's lots of ways to improve. Yeah, that's where, like you were saying before too, the comfort and the efficiency just really walk together in hand, and they just go together, and you get the bang for the buck. You say, we're going to save some energy. We're also going to be more comfortable and have control. I think it is nice to have control, especially that folks are home a lot more than they used to be necessarily. And even in office environments as well. There's these, even in multifamily, the apartments on the outside get colder and hotter than the apartments
Mhm.
on the inside. So let's give them the ability to control that.
Totally. Yeah, this one's kind of related. You mentioned this piece about health.
Hmm.
Um, which kind of home has better indoor air quality? That's something that particularly during wildfire season we talk about. It's
Yes.
like, how do we keep our air clean? And if we seal up a home, is there such a thing as being like too sealed up,
Mm,
or, are leaks okay?
yeah.
What do you say to this question?
Yeah, there's kind of this idea that houses need to breathe. That's a phrase that comes out quite often. And houses don't need to breathe, but people do. And I think that's something that we need to really keep in mind. We have technology to allow fresh air, to make sure the air quality inside of our homes is healthy. And we need to pair that with building practices that build a tight house. And I think it's something that's been challenging for the industry to wrap their head around. And it's something with the sort of code part of the energy program we're constantly educating folks on. It's a question that comes in frequently. We're putting together some information to distribute right now. We're actually currently working on that to clarify what's in the code, and also just to provide some just common practices. So yeah, build your house tight and then ventilate it appropriately. And it does seem counterintuitive to people, but it makes a lot of sense. And what's nice about, like you mentioned, fire season is I think brought it really to the forefront that if your house is leaky, that smoke's getting in your house.
Yep.
And if we can seal our house, that's great. But then you can cause moisture problems and indoor air quality problems. So if you put in a system that actually is intended to exchange air with the outside on a regular basis, that's the appropriate amount for your home. There's calculations you can do, there's models you can
You
do.
mean calculations and models that you could do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very straightforward though. Like that's the thing. They're not that complicated. And I think the other really big part of this that I like to say is the control piece. Like you were saying, we want smart homes. We want to be able to control homes. We want to know what's happening with our homes. And you can have leaks coming through your crawl space access into your dirty, dusty insulation, fiberglass filled crawl space or your attic, or you can have a pipe going out to your backyard where the breeze is flowing and where the air is nice and away from
Mm,
car exhaust and other pollutants that exist outside. We can make sure that we're not bringing those into our homes. And the other big piece of this is filtration. That air can be filtered. The
mhm.
air coming through from just your cracks in the house, it's not filtered air. It's just kind of whatever happens to make its way in, and it could be smoky, or it could be exhaust filled, or it could be your neighbor that smokes and the cigarette smoke's getting into your home. That's a big challenge with multifamily. It's actually a really big prevalent issue in multifamily housing, is how do we separate these units? Your neighbor cooks food that you don't really like the smell of, that seems like not that big of a deal, but it could
Mm,
actually really impact your quality of life to some extent. So um we want to create these separations, create really tight homes, and then choose where that air comes from and filter it and keep those
mhm.
filters clean, which is another big part of the conversation.
Right. Yes, if you haven't in the last couple of months,
Yes,
now
check
is
your
a
filter.
great time to check your air filter,
Check your
just like you would,
filter.
yeah, just like
And
you
when
would
you
on your
put it
car.
in, put the date, just write the date on it with a Sharpie, and then you'll know how long it's been. So,
Yeah, if you have if you have a
a forced air
programmable
system.
or if you have a programmable or a a smart thermostat, of course, it
Yes.
will remind you when you need to replace it during wildfire smoke events and things like that. Sometimes we'll be popping those guys
Yeah.
in like every few days
Yep.
because they get pretty nasty.
Right.
But the good news is while you have to replace your filter more often, you don't have to replace your lungs as often, which
Right.
is a feature.
Right.
And I can actually drop our link to just prepping for smoke season. I know it
Great.
seems very early, but now is the time to think about getting an air purifier or a
Yep.
box fan or filters and things like that because MERV 13 filters and air purifiers sell out like that the minute that there is a
Yep.
wildfire. So it's
Yep.
time, and
Yep.
I'll put a link in here. Let me just
Yep.
queue up the next question.
Be prepared. Yeah.
Yes. What's wrong with just building to code?
Yeah,
Isn't
absolutely.
it good
So,
enough?
yeah, this is a tough one. I think there's actually, first of all, when we say code, there's several layers of code. There's the international residential code, there's the international energy code, there's these I codes, mechanical codes, plumbing codes, etc. And a lot of those codes are perfectly fine. They're health and safety related, they're structurally sound. If you build this house, it will withstand X pressure. If it'll hold your roof up. We need to have certain spacing between our studs, that type of thing. And it's all really good information and it's a good baseline. And then states actually have the option if they're going to adopt that code or not. And Washington State is one of these states that adopts it and then makes changes. So there's amendments in place. And one of the big things that Washington State does is they have this energy code. So the energy code in Washington State is actually quite stringent, and it's getting to the point where building to code in Washington State is actually a lot more energy efficient than many other places in the country. So, I don't like putting down code built homes because, especially now with this, as we build upon the code cycle and we're constantly evaluating and improving the efficiency of code built homes, no one, they're not doing anything wrong. I think people that are trying to find workarounds to avoid meeting the code, that's a different story. And, I do think there is a little bit of that going on, which is unfortunate. But if someone is really building to the current energy code, they're solid, healthy, tight homes. And
Mm,
but we can always do better. And a lot of what's even in the current energy code is because people have pushed the envelope. They've, been early adopters. They've tried new strategies and techniques, and they've learned things that they've come to say, hey, this works. It's reliable. It saves energy. And those are the types of things that then, kind of get worked into the code. So it's this ever expanding, growing, changing process, especially in this state where we are really, trying to push towards some serious energy savings. It's government mandated that our buildings are better, and we need
mhm.
to really work towards that. And then there's folks that are building a passive house, right? Which is a whole, it's a certification, it's a whole other program, and those folks are going way above and beyond, and more power to them. I think that stuff is awesome, and there's a lot we can do. And
So
above
what's
code,
passive house?
yeah, so passive house is a standard. FIAS is the United States version. It's was started in Europe, and essentially, when we talk about tightness, right, zero point 0.6 air changes per hour. If people know what that means, it's extremely tight. If you look at the code, you can get away with 5 right now. So, that's a big difference. They're making them super tight, super energy efficient, super well insulated, really high quality windows. There's just, it's a checklist of things you need to do. But then there's an energy model, and you have to show that this house is going to perform. It's not just saying, yes, I checked these boxes, but it's
Mm,
actually saying this house, all of these pieces and parts are going to come together and really improve the efficiency of this particular project. Um, yeah, there's lots of programs like that. I mean, even Energy Star, it's just a way to evaluate your home and put a sticker on it that says, hey, this is Energy Star. It's not sort of just a code built house. They went above and beyond. And part of that is having an independent third party come out and say, not only are you saying you did this, but I'm verifying that in fact you did do these things, and
Sure.
you did a good job. And so you get some, accolades for that. And then moving forward, there may even be some money tied to that. There's a potential tax credit that's going to be tied to Energy Star certification in the future. So I encourage people to kind of keep an
Mm,
eye out for that.
cool. When should that drop? Later this year? Or?
Hopefully by the end of the summer. Yep, we'll
Oh,
see. It's a
okay.
very nebulous thing. It's just sort of keeps popping up, and it's still out there. It's very active. People keep talking about it, but it's a government level, higher level federal program type thing.
Hey,
So it happens
yeah.
when and if it happens, and it's tied to the Build Back Better program, which has been stalled. So there's a lot of moving parts there, but the language about what's proposed has been consistent.
Okay.
So if it does change, I would be really surprised. It's just a matter of if it gets adopted or not, and actually, put into law. So
Sure. And I think in general, perhaps a specific example is just one, but there's this whole sort of sea change that's happening, whether it's through codes of how you can build things, whether it's a totally new house, or even like an addition
yeah.
to a home. It also has certain qualifications that it needs to meet. So there's the codes and
Mm-hmm.
standards that are changing, right? It's sort of like light bulbs. Like you can hardly go out
Mm-hmm.
and find some of the old light bulbs that,
Right.
kind of like dim the lights when you flick them on because they're using so
Mm-hmm.
much, because LED is now the standard. Same
Yep.
thing is happening with how we build homes, how we
Exactly.
create appliances. And so it's cool to hear that there's also maybe some tax breaks or things like that for people who
Yep.
are even going beyond that. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is, and it's really helping push the market. There's also a zero energy ready program that could be tied to a tax credit as well.
Zero energy ready. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're just waiting
So
to not use
for
it, or like what does that mean?
So the idea is that if you're building a new home, it might not make financial sense for a spec builder, for example, to put solar on all of the houses. It might, go for it if it does. And in some markets, it's pretty easy to make that argument. But you can make it quote unquote solar ready.
Mm,
How do you orient the roof where the panels might go? Is the roof, are you going, if you go to an existing home and try to site solar, you may have to reinforce the roofing. You have to get an engineer out there. You need to make sure that the roof can handle the load. Is the roof's kind of, east-ish, might get some energy from the panels, but they're not going to be as efficient as if it was facing true south. So if you can orient the roof line, create a place in a mechanical room where the inverter is going to live, getting
mhm.
all the wiring, where everything, kind of just have a plan. Have a plan so when the day comes where solar is put on this house, it's just a lot more just easier. Flat out.
Sure.
Just to make it easier to add solar later.
Sure. Okay. Cool. And so, if folks are just joining us, we're chatting with Megan Kramer. She is a homes rater to verify if homes are super energy efficient. She's also the energy program coordinator for WSU. And we're chatting with her about new homes and also just sort of best practices with construction of homes in general. Since we're talking a little bit about rooftop solar, we did get a question,
Mhm.
and there's all these different rating systems going on.
Mm.
Like, does being solar ready or having a solar system, does it make it more efficient? Do you get points for that in some of
Mhm.
these systems? How does that fall into this?
Yeah, it absolutely relates and ties in. So there's a couple things on that topic. One is for a utility incentive, their solar programs are generally separate. So if you're looking for a high performance homes utility incentive, which there are many, Cascade Natural Gas has one, Chelan PUD has one, Puget Sound Energy has one. Anywhere, if anyone's calling in from Oregon, which you're probably not, there's a bunch of programs all over the country.
Call your own
Those
utility,
Yeah, call your own
Oregon.
utility and ask them. I don't know all the details, but they are out there, and they're looking at the energy efficiency of the home. So the solar wouldn't make sense in that program and other programs as well. So it's a little bit program specific, but essentially when I was talking about this energy modeling where you put all the pieces and parts into it and you see how efficient the home is, solar is a part of that. And you put that in and you can see kind of the before solar and the after solar and see how much of an impact it's going to have on your kilowatt hour savings and your utility bills as well. You can do some pretty accurate cost estimates in various software tools that are available. And I think you can really get it, get creative with solar. And maybe you have a standard hot water heater, but it's electric, and you have solar. You're offsetting your water heating with solar, standard electric water heater. So, I think that's the kind of stuff that if, people start getting kind of creative with, and the code does allow for that. So when there's points, for folks looking to build new homes, you get all these points for doing things, and there's a list of points that you can draw from. And solar is a big part of that. If you put solar on your house, you're a lot closer to hitting your points pretty easily. And it can be a really interesting way to look at doing it, where you can do all of these energy efficiency things, and there's also this renewables pot over here, and combining the two, you can actually make a really nice permit application and a nice quality home. Yeah.
If you're looking for a nice permit
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
application,
yeah, yeah.
contact Megan.
Yeah.
That's great. No, it's funny. I mean, we could geek out about this stuff, but
Oh,
at the end of
totally.
the day, I think that there is something that's very sexy about solar,
Yeah.
right? It's cool to be able to
Hmm.
say like, "Oh, I generated the power that I used on site,
Right.
and I'm hooked up, and then
Yep.
if the power goes out, like maybe I'll be able to power my home or
Right.
portions of my home and things like that." At the same time, when we look at the actual economics of it for Chelan County, Oregon, I don't know your story. Uh, but in Chelan County, rooftop solar doesn't make economic sense.
Yep.
It won't pay off, even if you're net metered and you get credit for every kilowatt hour that your solar panel produces. It still never quite makes it. It makes it up for that
Yep.
initial upfront cost. Even with tax breaks, even with things like that, there's still a lot of good reasons to do solar, as you mentioned, including meeting those points to get to reach code for your new home. But it's not always the most cost effective way to
Yep.
reach those things, because
Absolutely.
you're probably already going to need
Yeah.
heating system. So if
Hmm.
you put that money towards a better or smarter heating system,
Absolutely. Or water
that
heating system. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring up water heating. I don't think about my hot water tank unless it's just, unless it stops working. Then
Right.
everybody goes and digs it out and, unearths it from the closet and gets rowdy. But yeah, water heating is, can be like 20% of your energy
Hmm.
bills year round, which is a
Hmm.
lot of energy for something that we don't really think about. And
Yeah, and it is year round. I mean, when you look at base loads, it's sort of the thing that we take showers all year. Most people do, at
some
least.
people,
And depending
yeah.
on how big your family is, or
And
just what you're doing at your house. Like, some people use a lot of hot water.
sure. And what do you recommend if people want to cut back on their what they're paying for their hot water?
Yeah, I mean, I think that heat pump water heaters are great. I know there's a lot of, kind of chatter about if they, make sense, and, different plumbers that are, recommending them or not. And I have had a lot of good experience with them. I personally do not have one, but I'd like to retrofit my house to have one, and it's on my list of things I plan to do. There's several people in the energy program that have them and have for that firsthand experience. I've had them for years. There's a plumber that I have a relationship with through, he's been a resource for me over the years, where I've been able to call him and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or what's going on with this? Because he's been involved with programs forever, and installed them way back when, and there were issues, and had to pull them out and put new ones in, and kind of went through all of that, and still is a proponent of heat pump water heaters. It's a new technology, but so were ductless heat pumps just, 5-10 years ago. People had never seen those, but they'd been installed in other countries forever prior to that. And now they're very commonplace. It's like electric cars. It's like all of these newer things that, yeah, the mechanics are going to have to figure out how to fix them, and the plumbers are going to have to figure out how to install them. And, the number one thing with heat pump water heaters that people really need to think about is location, and making sure that they put them in the right place. And when you're talking retrofit, it might not make sense. And I think that's okay. You don't want to put a heat pump water heater into an area where it's not going to work, because that just, doesn't help anybody. They
Mhm.
need between 700 and 1,000 cubic feet of fresh air They pull air in from the surroundings and they exhaust cold air. So that cold air in the summer can actually be a net benefit to your home. In the winter, not so much. So, where is it? Is it in the closet of your bedroom, pushing out cold air in the winter? Maybe not the best choice. But is it in a garage? Then, yeah, it makes a lot of
It's a
sense.
no-brainer, sure.
Yeah, yeah. They're a bit
Yeah.
taller, but also I think people need to realize when we talk heat pumps, there's often, depending on the heat pump, it does not have to be the case, but often there's a little bit of backup, right? So if it gets really cold and the heat pump's not going to be able to reach the satisfy your thermostat, there's a little just electric resistant heat that kicks on. And that is true of the heat pump water heaters as well. So, you're running out of water or it's just cold and it's not able to really do what you need it to do. It's going to kick on that electric resistance backup. The same thing on your thermostat where it says emergency heat for your space heating heat pump. There's a little emergency heat option with the heat pump water heater as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can also duct them to the outside to get rid of the cold air. So there's lots
Yeah.
of ways to really, make them work for your particular situation. But I'm
Mhm.
also the first to admit that sometimes it's not going to make sense, and that's okay too.
Yeah, totally. If it's in the heart of your home, you're not gonna duck that thing.
Nope,
There's no
not going to
duct
work.
that you're gonna, bring through your living room. Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make
But there
sense.
Yeah, there are a lot of
Yep.
places where it does, and I read a study recently where they put it in a basement that was heated. This was a heated basement that was furnished and everything, and they didn't duct it, and they measured the temperature, how it changed, and in the space, it was generally 2 degrees lower,
Right.
having
Totally.
it. So
Yep.
it wasn't crazy. I mean, I don't think
Right.
it's necessarily the intended application for it, but it's also not crazy to keep a certain space, like your laundry room or something like that, 2 degrees cooler than the rest of your home.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Okay.
think the thought is that it's kind of constantly gushing out freezing cold air, and that is not what's happening. It's periodically putting out some cold air. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think people just need to kind of wrap their heads around. It's a new thing. They're going to be more and more prevalent, especially as code changes. It's really an easy way
Mhm.
to get some points, like I was saying. So,
Totally. Yeah,
yep,
it's
they're
all
a big
about getting
point
points.
item.
Okay, let's change a little bit. Let's talk
Great.
about the actual like what the house is made
Yeah.
out of. So
Sure.
we've got big giddy questions about straw
Yeah.
bale and hemp homes and
Yeah,
other naturally built
absolutely.
homes. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of materials out there that have been around forever that are starting to come to the forefront, especially as building materials get more and more expensive. Lumber is a major cost. And is there something else we can use? I think it's just a question that people are asking. And especially when you're looking to achieve these high R values in homes, R value is the thermal resistance of the wall. So, certain materials do a better job keeping the hot and cold air inside your house. And
Yeah.
maybe it's a certain material that's just thicker, or maybe it's actually a totally different material and it just does a better job. And you can find the R value per inch of materials, it's readily available. And so
And more is more with R value. Like, don't
yes,
confuse it with
right,
Windows, because Windows
right.
use U value, which is the inverse R
Yeah.
value for no real reason. In which
Yeah.
case, for Windows, lower is better, but for R value, it means bigger values, means more insulation, happier homes.
Yep. And it
Okay,
is
sorry.
additive and U values are not. So you can actually look at a wall assembly and say, I'm putting this material and this material and this material in layers. Let's add them all together. And what's the final R value? There's a lot of things you need to consider, moisture, dew point, vapor barriers. There's a lot going on in our wall systems these days. Older homes didn't have all of this going on and they were super leaky. They also stayed dry because air was flowing
Mhm.
through and any moisture that accumulated just left. So that's something that's a really important thing to think about. Where are our air barriers going? Where are our vapor barriers going? If we are using any sort of foam product or OSB, which is a lot of glue, impermeable materials, if we're putting plastic in our wall systems, which I would really encourage folks to consider not doing, um, you know, what are the
Is
implications
Tyvek
of that?
is Tyvek a plastic?
Nope, Tyvek is a permeable vapor. So the idea is it will, yeah, allow for the sheet goods to breathe. And so they want to be, keep the water out. It gets complicated, like I said. So there's all kinds of vapor barriers out there. The thing about Tyvek comes up a lot. People use Tyvek. Tyvek's not a bad product. Tyvek's not on the list of like super green, new, now they have vapor barriers that they open in certain temperatures and close, and they're allowing water, and it gets crazy high tech. Like anything, if it's installed well, fiberglass batt insulation can do a great job if it's installed well. It is extremely difficult to install well.
Mm.
That is what this really is all about. A heat pump works great if it's not the right size, and if the ducting is a mess, it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. So having a workforce that knows what they're doing and is installing things correctly is really the number one thing. And some materials inherently are going to be easier to install than others. So it just kind of takes that learning curve out of it. I do think the vapor barrier discussion gets a bit complex depending on what else is in that wall assembly. So you really have to look at examples of different wall assemblies in the various layers. Tyvek, if it's installed well, if it's taped, if the windows are flanged properly, and if there's proper insulation installed in the walls, it's not a bad product. It's just needs to be installed correctly. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of what we see is, that the corner of it kind of flapping in the wind and the sheet
Yeah.
goods getting wet during a rainstorm. And that's what we need to kind of guard against.
Okay.
Yep. But
Okay.
I do think that straw bale is a great option too. It's actually, people have been doing straw bale for a long time. They've been
Yeah, it
doing
started
rain
in
garth.
Nebraska in the 1800s.
It's
I'm
a
just
material.
saying.
It's a local material.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
local
true.
material for folks that aren't in the Pacific Northwest where lumber abounds. That people are building with, um, stucco, and they're materials that are there's stone houses because they had stones. And I think it's all part of the pictures. Like we were saying, trade-offs. What makes the most sense if you're going to spend a bunch of fuel delivering materials from far away? Does that make more sense than using something that's readily available? So there's like I said, the life cycle costs, the life cycle analysis is really important. We were just talking offline. We both know of multiple projects in the area as well as other places that have been built using straw, and it is a cool material, and it's going to continue. I think people are looking for those other options. The hempcrete blocks are really interesting as well. They there's all these products out there that are, like ICF is insulated concrete forms where it's foam and you fill it with concrete. Well, they also make them out of hemp. There's also different ways, there's people are, this is a place of massive innovation. There's a ton of time, energy, resources, funding going into finding different building materials right now. It's actually really exciting. And
Mm,
straw bale is definitely one of them.
for sure. So if you personally could pick,
Yeah,
what's your go-to right now, or which one would you explore first for your own home
it's
if
a
you were building
great
new?
question, and I do not have that answer. I wish that I
Oh,
did.
come on.
I would look at rock wool. We did talk about that a bit as well. So there's actually, so when it comes to what goes in the walls and then what goes outside, right? So that's another, I don't want to take this off a tangent of too much technical stuff for folks. I don't know if this is of interest, but there's continuous insulation where you have studs and they create a thermal break, and heat and cool go through the wood through your wall. And so when you look at insulation is in the bays, and then wherever that wood is, it's not as well insulated. So it actually decreases the R value of the whole wall system quite a bit. So what's really becoming more and more prevalent, and again, there's points in the code, is to put insulation on the exterior of the shell of the home. And foam board has been a really common way to do that. So that is one area where there's a lot of other manufacturers coming up with, more sort of environmentally friendly materials. And the foam people will say there's green foam and there's good foam and there's foam isn't so bad. And, feel free to do your own research. I'm not putting down foam because it definitely has its place.
We're foam
But
agnostic around here.
I'm foam
Okay.
agnostic, exactly. But there's rock wool. There's even a wood fiber material that people are using. There's a project in Roslyn that I'm aware of that's using it. There's, people are just getting really creative about what types of materials they're using. And so I do think that's a really interesting topic And I would consider rock wool with a blown in batt, maybe even fiberglass for cost effectiveness on the interior. And there's actually, fiberglass is more green than it used to be as well. So I would definitely do blown in batts, maybe wrap it in rock wool, think about vapor barrier, try to use plywood and not OSB. So some
Mm,
things like that. Low VOC paints,
sure.
those types of things.
And I know that you focus on new homes, but what if I have a home, I love it, and the
Yeah.
cavity in my walls is straight empty? What
Yeah.
are my options?
You have options. If there's anything in there, you really don't have many options. So having a blank canvas is actually better to some extent. I kind of almost wish in my current home they did some things over the years, and I'm going to have to basically sort of tear it out and redo it. So there
Mm,
are some advantages to just having nothing in your walls because you can drill holes and fill it with insulation. You really can. And I know it sounds a little bit invasive and difficult and challenging, but people absolutely do it. And it's something that will have a huge impact.
mhm.
Attic insulation, crawl space insulation, all great things. The surface area of your walls actually is bigger than both of those locations generally. And so it can have a really big impact getting some insulation into your walls.
Sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, no, again, it's like your water heater. We just like to shut the door or close the
Yep.
wall on it and completely ignore what's going on in there. But insulation can make a really big difference
Yeah,
in terms of your
huge.
comfort.
Absolutely.
Windows
Yes.
they fall into the sexy category. There was solar. So
Mhm.
windows and solar,
Yep.
those are you know, but windows, even if you replace, so I'm not talking about leaky windows. Like
Yep.
my I won't out my parents, but they own a beautiful historic home, and when it gets windy in the Wenatchee Valley,
Right.
we put playing cards in the
Mm.
older windows that have yet to be replaced because they just shake. That is a poor quality window that needs some serious love. I'm not talking about those, but for, good-ish
Yeah.
windows, even if you go from, a double pane that maybe that insulated glass isn't functioning as well as it should to a new one, you're going to see modest improvements in terms of comfort. It'll look better. It will increase your home value, all of those things. But in terms of comfort, your
Right.
windows are not where you probably would get the most bang for your buck. It's insulation. It's boring, hidden, you know, insulation. And we, for both those windows and for insulation, we offer rebates to help with the cost. But the insulation one will actually probably pay for a really meaningful
Right.
percentage. If you go and get
Absolutely.
fancy windows, our rebates are just going to be, maybe they'll
Yeah.
cover the sales tax or something.
Yep. Right.
on those.
It's a little, pat on the back, good job. You did a good
Yeah.
thing, but it's
Oh,
not
it
going to
is.
really
It's
help
great.
offset the cost. Yeah. And I think those things are great. And I think it is really important to have those programs to show people, that are doing those things that you support them. And it's a great thing to do, but it's not, there's a reason the amount is low because it just doesn't pencil out in terms of the energy efficiency, similar to what you were saying with the solar. A new
Yeah.
home, though, if you're choosing between windows, again, windows are expensive and there's a lot of choices. And so I think that folks can definitely just look at the options and be open to it because they are coming down in price. And there's some more local manufacturers. It used to be transportation was a bigger issue. So
Mm,
you can't, it's hard to bring windows over big mountain passes and stuff. They actually can have issues if there's gas in them. There's some more challenging things about it. But,
right. I
like I
never
said,
thought about the
yeah.
change of
Yeah,
pressure
it can actually
could
be
not
bad.
work
Yeah.
well.
So there's yeah, just yeah, Windows is again, it's kind of one of those other sort of techie ever evolving things where there's new products all the time and not every new house has to have some fancy, crazy expensive super low U value window. I think
Mm,
that that's one of those trade-off items that if you're looking at windows or insulation, let's definitely put some money into insulation like you were saying.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so I'm putting a last call out there. If you have questions for Megan about all or any of these things, type them in the chat. She can see them and we'll have her answer those. And I just have one more question for you, Megan.
Great.
Okay, this one's a little bit more technical, but what's the difference in all these different home rating
Yeah.
systems? Which one do
Mhm.
I pick? What do I do?
That's a great question. So there's energy programs like Energy Star. So I like to mention Energy Star because it's just really familiar. People have Energy Star light bulbs, they have Energy Star refrigerators, Energy Star heating systems. Energy Star is really a common thing, and that can be applied to your entire house. Your whole house can be an Energy Star house. And I think that's a really accessible one. You have to be a little better than code, not leaps and bounds, nothing, too crazy, but you do have to be a little bit better than code. And there are certain things you have to do. The home needs to be tight and it needs to be verified. You can't just say you did it. You have to have someone come out and verify that you did these things. So that certification has some weight to it. And longevity. The program's been around. It's not going anywhere. What's being sort of tacked on to that is now more and more things. So that's a bit of a base. There's this zero energy program I touched on. And then there's also zero energy ready, excuse me. And then there's also an indoor air quality certification. There's a water efficiency certification. There's all these things you can get that, you can get kind of this suite of certifications that just so that it's a healthy, energy efficient water, conserving household. And I think those things have a lot of value, especially for a builder who is trying to build and sell. And the market right now, that's not something that's hard. If you're building houses, it's pretty easy to sell them, but that could shift. Who knows? We've all been through ups and downs in the market for sure. So I think that's really important to just be aware of. And then you can do Built Green, which is all of those things, like I said, water, energy, indoor air quality. And they're also looking at socioeconomics a bit. And they're also looking at living wage. And they're also looking at, not just these, kind of the checklist items, but how does it really all tie together? And local materials and site landscaping. Are you, maybe you're, they're looking at making sure that you're thinking about native landscaping and site disturbance. Did you go into pristine wilderness and cut down every single tree? Or did you have an arborist come out and help you make some intelligent choices about how to manage your land? There's just a lot to it. And some of these other programs, Built Green is pretty specific to Washington. It's most prevalent in the Seattle area. There's also the National Green Building Standard, which is a national program that does similar things. There's LEED. People have heard about LEED quite a bit. It's definitely more of a commercial scale program. There is a homes program. There's, like I said, that passive house is kind of the upper echelons of that. There's living building, where they actually want you to show with your bills that you are net zero in energy and water throughout, the first couple years the home is in use. So there's some really innovative things going on. There's some really cool ways to show that you're walking the walk and not just saying you're doing these things, but you're actually having, and there's professionals like myself who can come out and answer questions and help you, kind of lead the way, and then make sure you did what you said and the house is working the way that you intended. So those are all really cool things.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't realize that there were so many different options. So how would somebody start?
Great
Okay, I
point.
have this
Mm-hmm.
I have this
Yep.
idea. I want to create a new home or a large addition or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be intentional, but I don't even know where to really start. What do I do?
Yep. Well, obviously you can contact the energy program, Northwest Raider at energy.wsu.edu. That's kind of the generic email, or feel free to email me. I'm available. We have a list of energy raiders, and it's a list for the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Montana, Washington, and Oregon. And it shows you where they're located, links to their website, their contact information. You can find a professional and, see what they say. And you can also, contact all of those programs and, see which one sort of makes the most sense for you. And there's some legwork involved. I think that's an old sort of thing that people used to say is only active homeowners can live in passive houses, because it's not cookie cutter. It's very customized and there's a lot of decisions to be made. And but it's interesting. And I think people that really start down that road, it's interesting, it's exciting. And there's a lot of really good people doing lots of really good work. And there's a community aspect where, folks just want to help. People that are energy raiders, we do this because we're passionate about it and we want to see cool projects come through and we want to work on your house, that you're doing something different and unique and interesting. And often they're in beautiful places too. So
Yeah,
the bonus.
Like you're based out of Peshastin, so
Yes.
you do a lot of sort of Upper Valley things, but you can
Hmm.
do the whole county in
Yes.
terms of helping people just get started, and they could contact the energy program at Wazoo that you mentioned. You'll have to give me the link so I can drop it in the
Yeah, I
comments.
should have. We could
That's
put
really
it in.
helpful though.
Yeah.
And this comment about, what was it that you have to be active to live in a passive home? That's
Yeah.
true. But in general, I think that we often forget about how, thank you.
I just put it in the chat. Yeah.
Um, let's see if I can copy this bad boy. We often forget about where homes sort of started and how they've morphed over the years.
Mm.
Like if we think even 100 years ago, homes didn't have a ton of mechanical systems. They didn't, right? They might have had, plumbing and things that we really appreciate, but when it got hot, you would wear certain clothes. You would, when it was breezy, you'd fling open that side of the house, get a
Yep.
air breeze going through.
Absolutely.
When it got cold, maybe you wouldn't hang out in certain parts of your house
Hmm.
as often, right? You'd be in front of a fireplace, or people adjusted and they were used, their bandwidth of what they could work within was a lot wider. Now we're like, okay, if it is not 72
Yeah.
degrees, 40% humidity,
Yes.
like, check, 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 check. The lighting levels have to be this, like all of these things, and make it automatic. Oh my gosh, my home is not performing correctly. And maybe it's true, but maybe you're right. There's also this piece of active thing, like even simple things like adjusting your window
You're right.
shading throughout the day, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
That's not passive. It could be if you have automated awnings and
Yeah,
shades and
and
things like that.
you can go that route, and people certainly do.
Mhm.
Kind of the smart home option is out there, but I also think you're right. Some folks you just need to sort of think about, well, if the sun
You
beats
just twist
down,
it.
just shut your blinds. Yeah.
Yeah. Pull
Yeah,
the
and I
cord.
think one of the things that's changed drastically is heating equipment.
Mm.
There used to be like 5 sizes of furnace, and if you had this size house, you got this size furnace, and that's what you got, and it worked or it didn't, and it was loud, and it blew cold air in your face, and it did weird stuff, and it just kind of was like too bad. And then I think the new heating systems, especially, they're variable speed and they are techie, and I get where people, I think, sometimes want to get away from that. But I think there's solutions to problems. If you have problems, there are solutions out there. That's one thing to think about. If you have an existing home with some problems, some comfort issues, some health and safety challenges, there really are ways to make it better. But if you're building a new house and you build it super tight and super well insulated, you don't need a fancy heating system. It kind of helps you get back to that more basic system where it's smaller.
Yeah.
So economics also really help you with that too. Maybe you're spending a little bit more on insulation, but all of a sudden you need half a size in terms of tonnage of your heating system. So, you could definitely, there's a lot of ways to make things pencil out when it comes to, yeah, just putting in smaller zoned heating and cooling and having them serve your house because it's tight and it's insulated.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's always really fun chatting with you because I
Yeah.
love geeking out on this stuff.
I know.
Thank you for, let me just drop your email in
Yeah,
here.
great. Feel free to get in touch directly. And if I'm not the right person, I can send you to who is if you have questions.
I love
Yeah,
that. There's so many
absolutely.
great resources here, so thank you.
Yes, yes. Um,
Um,
yeah,
anything else for posterity?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered a lot. That was really interesting. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I think it's just a really exciting field, and I feel fortunate to be doing what I'm doing. And I really do want to talk to you and answer people's questions and help out. And like I said, if people ask a question and I don't know the answer, then it's something I need to find out. And I'm happy to do that. So
Yeah, we're total eager beavers, like,
yeah,
we love chatting about this
yes,
stuff, so
exactly.
you
Let us know.
just email Megan,
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
there for you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan.
And thank you
And
for what you're
Megan, I'm
doing,
also
Lacey. Yeah.
really excited next time on the Power Hour, we have something completely different.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you knew this, but every time that you go on the internet or you use a phone or things like that, it actually uses electricity because data centers actually power the cloud. The
Yeah.
cloud is not a a magical unicorn place.
It's
It's
not
an
really a
actual
cloud.
physical place. No, it's not a cloud. And so, to really get to the bottom of how we're using energy, particularly here in Chelan County, and maybe down in Malaga as well, as they start developing that potentially for a server site, I am going to be chatting with Ryan Bebout. He is the general manager of Sabi Data Centers for the West. And he's graciously going to join us next time so we could talk about how we power the internet. Just small
Interesting.
topics on the Power Hour. Yeah. So hopefully you'll join us and we'll answer some questions with Ryan next time. Again, Megan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lacey. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.